Hello Overwatch fans, my name is Spherno and welcome back to the rabbit hole that is power ranking, something that I love to do but can never seem to get right according to my viewers. Today is a very special power rankings video because we're tackling the end of the May Melee tournament, which means that some of the power rankings are going to be a little bit easier to do than others. Now that means for a few set rules or some things that you guys should know that might not surprise you in the future. If they won the tournament, or the teams that got to the finals will most likely be my top seeded teams. Meanwhile, the teams that were out in the quarterfinals or out in the first round are probably going to be the last teams in the power rankings. Just sort of some ground rules that kind of make sense. The only difficult part about these rankings was deciding within a section or within the quarterfinals or within the semifinals who were the worst teams in that part of the tournament. Meaning that I had to rank them against the teams that they played against, and how those teams then played in the future. So, just some basic things to go off of. So, let's get started down here in the Asian region. Starting off with my bottom team, it's got to be the Hangzhou Spark. I mean, they just, out of all three of the teams that went out in the quarterfinals, they played the worst against their opponent. New York, Shanghai, Seoul. Sure, those were the three teams that these lower seeded teams had to go against, and those are some pretty impossible hurdles to mount, but you kind of expected them to put up a better fight, and Hangzhou just didn't, so they deserve this bottom spot. Right above them is going to be the Chengdu Hunters. Now, there was kind of a tie for this spot between London Spitfire and Chengdu Hunters, but because London Spitfire played the Shanghai Dragons and did as good as they did, plus they've already beat the Chengdu Hunters in a match, I really just got to give this higher seat to the London Spitfire and leave the Chengdu Hunters down here in 6th place. On to my top 4 teams. Again, these are going in order of how they performed in the tournament. So the New York Excelsior, who got 3-0'd by the Shanghai Dragons, have to be next. The Guangzhou Charge put up a pretty good fight against their opponent, but New York just didn't look like they had a hold on the meta. They didn't know what they were doing, even though there wasn't a specific meta. They could have literally run anything they wanted. They just didn't look comfortable with anything. So they got completely rolled by the Dragons, which, to be fair, some of us expected, but at the same time, I think we all expected New York to put up a bit of a bigger fight. Right above the New York Excelsior is going to be the Guangzhou Charge. These guys were the number 1 seed in the region coming into the tournament, which meant that they had the first day off. That was great until they had to go up against the Seoul Dynasty, right? And the Seoul Dynasty 3-2'd them. Now, it was a 3-2, which means the Guangzhou Charge played out of their minds trying to keep up, but the Dynasty just had a hold on a lot of the good metas, a lot of the good compositions. Their teamwork was spot on, and they really made both the Charge and the Dragons work for their positions. So Charge, number 3, only because you put up a better fight than New York did against your opponent. And finally, the top 2 teams are obviously the winner and the loser of the finals, respectively, Shanghai Dragons and Seoul Dynasty. Shanghai pulled off the best reverse sweep I think we've seen in the history of Overwatch, coming down from 3 maps and wiping the floor with Seoul the last 4. Now, that's not to say that it was not a close game. Shanghai and Seoul both played out of their minds to beat the other team, but in the end, Shanghai just showed that when it comes to the pressure, when the pressure gets turned on, they're on their game. So, great job, Dragons, for taking the victory in this tournament. And Seoul Dynasty, I want you to keep going. I know hero pools are coming back. That's kind of disappointing because that means you guys are going to go back to being the most diverse team in the league in terms of win-loss record, but I want to see them continue to dominate like they did during this tournament. But now it's time to go across the ocean to the North American region, and there's 13 teams here to rank, but it was a little bit easier because I ranked them by how they performed in the tournament, and some teams just made it to this stage and other teams made it to this stage, and it was really good for organizing how I wanted to set up this power rankings. So, starting with our number 20, or not number 20, but number 13 and number 12 teams, the Vancouver Titans and the Washington Justice. Now, you guys knew Vancouver was going to be the number 20 team here. I'm going to call it number 20 because it's bottom, whatever, they're number 13. I know. Get off my case. Now, the Titans are number 13 because they were the first team out in the tournament. No real reason besides that. I think if they had beaten the Toronto Defiant, obviously the Defiant would be last, but they didn't, even though it was extremely close. So the Titans are getting better over time, just as we assumed that they would. And that means that we could see them start to win more games in the future, but for now, because I'm basing it off the May Melee tournament, they are sitting in the last spot. Right above them, already placed, are the Washington Justice. Now, here's where I had to start ranking team performance against other teams and their opponents. Now, the Justice had one of, if not the toughest opponent going into the quarterfinals, which were the Los Angeles Gladiators, and they got 3-0'd, of course, so they did have the worst performance of all of these teams, but when push comes to shove, they still did better than the Titans, so they're going to be in number 12. Otherwise, I don't really have too many good things to say about them. Right above the Justice are going to be my number 11 team, the Toronto Defiant. I feel bad putting them here because, and hear me out on this, not only did they have a tough opponent in the Atlanta Reign, but they had just played a game like 2 hours prior to their match. Can you imagine the mental stress that must go into that, playing 2 games that decide the entire fate of your career for the month of May, and you're completely boomed going into it? I mean, the Defiant looked so confused when they were playing the Reign, and I don't blame them. I mean, they didn't have any prep time, really, and they were still coming off of nearly being beat by the Vancouver Titans. So, sorry, Defiant, I feel like you guys could have done better, but them's the rules, and the rules weren't in your favor this time. Coming in above the Toronto Defiant in the top 10, but of course in this 13-team ranking, 10 doesn't really mean all that much, is going to be the Houston Outlaws. They played Dallas in a really awesome battle for Texas, but Decay was on fire, and Houston got just wiped across the floor in the final map. They took, I believe they took one map? I want to say it was a 3-1. I didn't look at the score too closely, but I mean, Houston. You still performed better than the other teams beneath you in the quarterfinals, but you just didn't perform better than my number 9 spot, the Boston Uprising. Boston's not a bad team anymore. I can't believe I'm saying that. I never thought I'd say that in a million years, especially since less than a week ago we would have said that they were a bad team. But now they're better than the Justice, the Defiant, the Outlaws, the Uprising, and in some ways they are better than the Gladiators even. But because of the way that the tournament goes and the way that I'm power ranking the tournament results, Boston has to come in at the number 9 spot. But good job, because in the future, when I'm not kind of boxed in by how they performed in the tournament, I think you guys have the chance to make it even higher. I don't know what the arrival of Punk did for you guys, but between him and now you've added Mikey, maybe there's something in the cards for you. Maybe there's just a little something there that might be happening and making these guys definite playoff contenders. Above the Boston Uprising, we have the semi-final teams, or the teams that got eliminated in the semifinals, and this is a team that I wanted to place just a little bit higher, but the team that I was going to put above the Boston Uprising would have gotten me flamed in the comments, so I'm not going to risk that this time. I'm going to put the Atlanta Reign in 8th place. They just kind of fed off of the bottom teams during this tournament. They went against the... What was it? They went against Toronto Defiant, where the Toronto Defiant were already boomed from their win against the Titans. So the Reign only made it into the semifinals because they played against a team that was leagues weaker than them. Obviously, you could say whatever you want about underestimating the Reign and blah, blah, blah. I should be placing them higher. I should have more faith in them. But I just can't because they chose the Defiant. They had a choice. They weren't the Fuel. The Fuel got whoever was left, and the Reign could have chosen a stronger opponent, but instead they were like, no, no, no. We're going to take the Toronto Defiant of all teams because they just played and are weak. So great job, Reign. You're picking on teams that aren't on your level. Right above the Reign are going to be the Los Angeles Gladiators. They played a pretty decent match against the Philadelphia Fusion. And of course they won 3-0 against the Justice. But that's not the point. The point is they went against the Fusion, who are the number 3 team in the league. Oh wait, spoiler alert. My bad. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Not really. You guys kind of knew it was coming. But they did play the Philadelphia Fusion and get completely rolled. But at least they aren't the Reign. At least they chose, well, they did choose to go against the Justice. But to be fair, everybody thought the Justice were going to do a little bit better than that because they had Janu and Stitch. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for them. Gladiators 3-0'd them. But at least they didn't choose the Defiant. Right above the Gladiators are going to be a team that's may deserve a little bit higher. I'll admit, they probably deserve just a little bit higher than this, but the Paris Eternal are going to go right above the Gladiators. They beat... Who did they beat? Who did they beat? I'm getting confirmation. They beat the Boston Uprising. Okay. They did beat the Boston Uprising, but it was a 3-2 affair, which just goes to prove that the Uprising deserved their spot here, and also proves that the Paris Eternal may not be the great team that we think they are. I mean, the Valiant, we saw them get completely boomed by the Shock in the semifinals, but prior to that, the Eternal lost to them, and if the Eternal can lose to what I would call single-handedly the weakest team that made it to the semifinals, do they really deserve the spot above the number 5 Dallas Fuel? You guys cannot look me in the eyes and tell me that the Dallas Fuel had a bad weekend by any means. Sure, they didn't make it to the semifinals, but look at who was stopping them from getting to the semifinals. It was the San Francisco frickin' Shock. The number 1 team, the team that won the finals. So, you cannot tell me that the Fuel did not have a bad weekend, or did not have a good weekend, beating all of these other teams beneath them. Granted, it was just the Houston Outlaws. I know. They did incredible, and they did so much better than the Paris Eternals. So, they get to take my number 5 spot. They were the best team in the quarterfinal, series. Alright, right above the Dallas Fuel, and these are kind of obvious because I ranked them based on semifinal performances, are going to be the Los Angeles Valiant in 4th place because, I mean, they got 3-0'd by the Shock. I don't even know what to say about that. Shock, you're a good team, but Valiant, it really felt like you guys were just throwing the game. Like, it's not even possible to have been that bad. You knew Reaper wasn't working. You knew Echo wasn't working against the Shock. Did you switch to your comfort picks of Widow and Tracer? You switched onto the Widow once. And it was on, what, like, Hanamura? I think it was Hanamura? I don't know. I fell asleep halfway through the game, and I shouldn't have because that's my favorite team. But I fell asleep halfway through the game because it was that bad. And it was a short game, too. I didn't even have time to take a nap, but I did anyway. That's how boring you guys were to watch. However, you did beat the Eternal, so I kind of got to give you props there and put you above, because you did make it to the semifinals, top 4 team, whatever. The next team above the Valiant is going to be, obviously, the Philadelphia Fusion. They played good, but not good enough to make it to the finals. What more can I say about it? That's all I've got to say about that. And of course, your top 2 teams are going to be, just like in the Asian region, the winner of the finals and the loser of the finals, respectively. Florida Mayhem finally get to be a top team. After bottom feeding for 2 years, they finally make it to the top. And I'm so proud of them. I need to get myself a Mayhem jersey just for that reason. but I can't believe they finally made it to number 2. They even beat out the Philadelphia Fusion. We all thought it was going to be Shock versus Fusion, 7-map extravaganza, best game in the league for the past 3 years, but it wasn't, because the Mayhem got the edge over the Fusion. Now, you can claim whatever you want about the Fusion. Maybe they weren't up to their game, maybe this wasn't their weekend, etc., 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 a million different reasons, but in the end, I don't think it has to do with any of that. I think there's only one reason that the Fusion lost, and it's that the Florida Mayhem are beasts. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Now, the number 1 team, for as much as I hate to say it, is the San Francisco Shock. Why do I hate to say that? Because I don't like the Shock. Big heads, and while they have the skill to back it up, while they do have the talent to back it up, I'm not gonna deny that. I just think their egos are maybe a bit bigger than they should be, and I'll give it to them. If you win a title in Stage 2 and can still manage to be the top team and not pull a London Spitfire, looking at you guys, then yes, you deserve to be the number 1 team. Plus, you won these finals, and I kind of have to put you number 1 team because you did show up literally everybody else in your region. So that's going to be my North American Power Rankings and my Asian Power Rankings. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed it, go ahead and hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. I can't say it enough. I'm going to probably put a big red sign on this video that says subscribe. And if you don't, I don't know, you're probably the Vancouver Titans. If you don't subscribe, you're the Vancouver Titans. And that's about it. But in the meantime, until I see you guys in the next video, I have been Spherno, and thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video, probably with Pear joining me again. Goodbye.